Welcome, everybody, to the Key to Games podcast here on Game Wisdom, where he's in the art and science of games. I am Josh Beiser, and joining me, my co-host, a developer working on the game Samurai Pig, Joshua Reyes. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Had a pretty good week. Weather's a little warm, but I am excited to talk about this topic. I know, a lot of people thinks that MMOs are dead, but we're here to talk about them, and I'm a topic I really love. So pumped to let's get going.
Mm-hmm. And I'm finally I have to get this all installed, but I got a new curtain, soundproof, light-proof, all that proof that at some point we have to get hooked up here. That will improve the acoustics in this room. And we don't have to worry about that blinding lens flare when the light shines right on my dresser, my little thing down there. At some point, that will be ETA, I guess, or to be
Yeah,
announced.
I'm
But
gonna have to get that myself. I'm now
mhm,
since Josh is
mhm,
getting it, we can't have lens flare on one and not that's not consistent art
yeah,
style, Josh.
yeah. But as Josh said, our topic is going to be talking about MMOs. This was something that we started with the Extreme Cast, but it's only something that I think is a really good evergreen topic, and that is breaking down genres, especially how much things have changed over the past 20 plus years. And we are beginning, of course, with the MMOG. Not the oldest genre by any means, but one that for, we could say, maybe like 8 years, maybe a little bit more than that, kind of dominated the mainstream landscape. With the rise of course, Everquest, World of Warcraft, just about every game that had online in the title in the 2000s.
Definitely. I mean, that was a very pivotal. I mean, that's when people think of MMOs, like that's definitely like the time when everything was happening. People were, new
Mm-hmm.
experimental designs were coming out. People were doing MMOs of all types, from like The Matrix to like
Mm-hmm.
Lotro, Final Fantasy. So a really cool and interesting time to look back in
Yeah.
history of MMOs for sure.
And thank you, Chris. Don't forget, of course, Ultima Online. Of course,
Ultima.
Lord British, Richard Garriott, the famous when someone
Mm.
killed his character in game.
Yes. Yes.
And yeah,
The,
like,
Those are
the,
the cool, like those were really
yeah.
cool things, like that'll never happen again, like
Mm-hmm.
in MMOs because like was literally the first time we were playing together. So amazing, cool stories come out like that. I love that. Also Meridian 59
Oh,
was one of
yes.
those. Yeah.
Yeah, and when I was doing the research for the live service book, I talked about a brief history of the MMOG genre, and it's like very up in the air what's considered the first
Yeah.
MMOG, because we go back to MUDs or multi-user dungeons, which those admittedly they were before my time. I have never touched a MUD before, but of course, in the late 90s and in the early 2000s, the MMOG genre, or just to be easier, I'm just going to say MMO for everything. It'll be one less syllable to have to say. But stuff like World of Warcraft, EverQuest, and so on really brought this golden age of this kind of genre. And this was something that Rami and we have spoken about this, countlessly. Whenever we have chats about live service and this kind of support. Like, if I was being generous, I guess my first MMO would be the game Shattered Galaxy. This was a kind of real time strategy. You collect different units, you level them up, and then you bring your, I think it's like 5 or 6 robot squad into a giant battle with all the other players. So it's like 30 people will turn into, I guess, like 300 units or something like that per
Wow.
side. And Rami and we both love that game, and unfortunately, it is no longer available. And that will definitely be a topic. I think that will come up many times in our discussion tonight about games that are no longer available.
Let me ask
Most,
you.
yeah,
Let
go
me
ahead.
ask you. Yeah, I'm sure you were just about to ask me the same one, but you said that's your first one. So,
Mhm.
like, emotionally, and like, what did that game give to you? Like, as an MMO, did that really like structure your ideas of how MMOs would be, or did it like open your mind at all the possibilities, like emotionally, and how did it affect you?
I think it was the first time, like, as someone who's both introverted and really couldn't, who had mobility issues, and my right leg being all busted and stuff. This was kind of like the first time that I really had a chance to be sociable to people online.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that was, I think, one of the things that kind of stuck with me when I went to play games like City of Heroes,
Yeah.
And I think that like Shadow Galaxy and Sea of Heroes like the only two kind of MMO style games I think that I really dug into. I played Shadow Galaxy for at least a year. I think Sea of Heroes, I think maybe 1 to 2 years. I forget how long I spent playing it, but like, and this was one of the big things about the MMO genre. I think what a lot of people wanted to see is the communal aspect. That it's not just you playing this game by yourself for 50 to 100 hours. You can
Yeah,
find friends, you can invite your friends. We get guilds and communities and PvP. And there was this idea, of course, that these games were bigger than the individual player. And that
right.
was, of course, I think the big thing that I think attracted so many people is that it is this world. It is, well, at the time, the living, breathing world, as
Real.
everyone tried to make theirs out to be. But again, like, for people who grew up playing single player and console games in the 80s and 90s, I mean, oh my god, it's not just like four people or a 5v5, it's hundreds of thousands
Hundreds,
of
thousands of
people
people.
playing all at once.
Right.
And it was huge. And again, like, when we talk about huge, peak World of Warcraft was what, like 14 million, maybe even more
hmm
than that subscribers a
Wait.
month.
I think I said it wrong last time. It was like 17 or
Hmm.
18, right? I mean, that's massive, like huge amounts. Yeah, and I mean, going from a single player game and then all of a sudden it's kind of like you're on a playground, a virtual playground again, like
Hmm.
sharing common goals in this video game with constructed rules. Like it was groundbreaking at the time and really cool.
Yeah. And to Chris's comment about Shattered Galaxy, and that was the issue with kind of sustaining the MMO experience. And it's something that when we talk about kind of how mobile and live service games have really eaten into this market in the past like 8 to 9 years, that we'll be coming back to later on. But
hmm
for you, Josh, what was your first MMO experience?
My first was actually Final Fantasy 11, and I that was pretty much it. Like, played a little bit of Rift, but it's been Final Fantasy 11, and I still have an account that every now and then I'll dive into and just muck around in. But to me, it was like game changing because it was like 1 year before WoW, so it still had some like archaic, very archaic things. Like
Hmm.
if you died like while you're leveling or whatever, you de-level, so you could lose like it would take like a full day, 8 hours or whatever to get one level, and if you were fighting a mob and you perished, you lost all of the day's work. So super hardcore, super fun. And Yeah, that was definitely my favorite just an amazing like mind-opening experience to see all these players working together to achieve goals, and like we had raids in there. So yeah, FF11 for me was my first MMO for sure.
Hmm.
Toontown.
Yeah, that was definitely a. I would think I was a little too old for that one by that point.
Right.
Yeah.
Same here, same here. I wanted to give it a roll, but I didn't want anybody to catch me playing Toontown.
I guess how many people grew up playing Club Penguin? That was another
Club
one that I
Penguin.
heard like
Yeah.
so many people play, and that again never touched it, never
Yeah.
even. And yet,
What's
hello,
the other one?
Mumuma.
Umuma.
Yeah, and of course
Story Maple. The Stories of
Maple,
Maple.
Maple Story. That was another
That's
huge
right.
one. Guild Wars, of course, was
Guild
another,
Wars.
and I definitely want to touch more on Guild Wars and kind of like I guess like the middle generation of MMOs in a few
Right.
minutes.
And also what Guild Wars did for like monetization. Like they kind of did a little
Hmm.
something different there.
Oh yeah,
Clever.
that's a huge one as well. Yeah, and
Mhm.
to Chris's comment about early MMOs also live and limitless, yeah, like again, like this was one of the big things when we talk about, and this topic is probably a little bit too big for our conversation, but when developers like break into a new genre, or kind of like the early genres of the game industry, like there were no rules. No one had to. There was nothing that said, this must be an MMO or this must be a first-person shooter. So everyone just tried to do whatever the heck they
Ever.
wanted, and it led to wildly different games.
Really
What was that
cool.
one? Anarchy Online, I heard, was
Anarchy
pretty big at the
Online.
time. Uh,
Mm.
the Secret Files, I remember that one was another
There
one
was
that
Perfect Something. Man. Bummer. I should have had the list up. But so many experimental they just anything that they could try to make the Matrix, anything they could try to make an MMO, they did.
Yep. Star Wars, Star
Star
Trek,
Trek.
Harry Potter, Dungeons and Dragons, and so on. Yeah, and a lot of, I think, when we saw this kind of shift from, I guess, small time MMOs to big time, definitely came with World of Warcraft. That would be
Right.
2004. And
Yeah.
I've said this before, I've spent a grand total of 4 months playing World of Warcraft. And I remember it was
Really?
like one day I was playing it, I was like cutting down, chopping logs or doing nodes. I was like, what the heck am I doing here? Why am I playing this game? And then I uninstalled it, canceled my account, and I've never looked back. I just had that moment of, wait, why am I doing this? Like, there's that episode of The Simpsons when they were like making fun of World of Warcraft, and like Mo was being like, his head was like being like killed by ogres. He's like, why am I paying $14.99 a month for this? And that was my exact feeling there. Yeah, exactly, Paul. Yeah, those are rookie numbers. I never made to end level, never made it to all that stuff.
Are you getting called heretic and rookie?
Yeah, I'm not a
Actually,
gamer.
I got maybe like 10 minutes. I probably got 10 minutes of WoW game time, and I was like, I'm not doing this. So
Oh, there
much
you go. Send this stream to Blizzard. Let them know about this.
in a class action.
Yeah.
No, I don't think MMOs have reached their full potential at all.
Hmm.
No, definitely not. And I think we're gonna get to that later.
Yeah. Where the genre can go.
Oh,
But yeah, like, if we're keeping with the historical side of things, 2004 was kind of that banner year. This was when every publisher, every major studio thought to themselves, I could make the next World of Warcraft, or I could make, 50% World of Warcraft, or 20%. And this led to pretty much from like 2004 to maybe like 2009, 2010, this gold rush period of
yeah.
MMOs. Everyone was trying to make the next big one. Everyone was trying to promote, you are entering this world, and so on and so forth. And one thing that we should definitely touch on, of course, is the monetization. Because this is, again, this was, let's see, 2004, so this would be about maybe like 4 or 5 years out before we saw like the first like mobile games, first casual games. And of course, MMOs brought with it a different kind of monetization. And I'm sure everyone here remembers spending $14.99 a month for whatever was their favorite game.
Yeah.
And to post comment, no, I never touched a RuneScape. I've heard a lot of things about it. What about you?
Yes, I did play RuneScape just for like experimentation, just to try it out and see. But again, maybe an hour isk or so. Actually, funny thing is, I tried to play EverQuest on Steam, like the first EverQuest, and I did the first quest just to see like how far we've came from that one, and I was quite surprised at how clunky it first was, the first EverQuest quest. But yeah, I completed the first EverQuest quest, so feel good about that.
Mm-hmm. And the monetization of these games were definitely aimed for developers' purposes. The idea of
Mm.
continually getting, I should say, $15 a month for these games. And again, like at this point, we will probably, outside of actually working at Blizzard, never know exactly how much revenue they made off of World of Warcraft. But
I think they literally made the whole company, the whole companies that bought it out, like massive amounts of money off of that game.
yeah,
You know, wild.
yeah, and like to me, like one of the things that definitely got or like made soured me on MMO genre at that time, to board fans' comment, was the time gating, or the amount of time you had to spend either playing the game or just the amount or being charged, by the month to play these games. Because again, like $15.99 a month, like again, like we're talking to people who in the last decade have been buying games for under $5 who have spent probably $10 on a Humble Bundle to get 20 to 30 games. The Games Pass, $12, I think what, it's like $12 or $15 a month for the Games Pass, and you get hundreds of games that you can play for free.
Right.
And back then, we were spending 15 or 14.99 for one game. Let's see. Yeah, and it was again that case of everyone trying to be the next World of Warcraft, and this I think definitely lent itself into that soulless feeling to these
Most
MMOs.
empty, like cold, sterile MMOs, and during that time I remember trying like everyone because like you were saying, they're like, welcome to this amazing different MMO world, and it's really just the same type of MMO, and so you go in there and it's very sterile. Like Rift, I was one of the most sterile, strange MMOs I've ever played. It was like the perfect WoW clone, but it was so like, I mean, if you wanted to make a WoW clone, they did it like perfect. And like, I mean, couldn't do it better. But again, it felt so soulless and lifeless and everything. And then by then, we were already starting to get a little inundated with massive amount of clones, and that was probably like the last one that I could stomach in that realm. But excellent in that regard.
hmm And
Yeah.
to Chris's comment, the tab targeting line of sight system, yeah, like that was another like big thing that really knocked me out a lot of interest of kind of the early to middle generation of MMOs. This
Hmm.
very abstracted based design. Again, if we look at games today with the likes of Fortnite, Valorant, League of Legends, and so on, that are far more reflex driven based design. The likes of World of Warcraft and all those other games, it just felt like going back to like a horse and buggy for me. That it was
Right.
just so. It just was so just like off for me. The idea that the enemy swings a sword, I walk 10 feet away, but because I was at the server when he's swinging that sword, I'm still getting hit even though I'm nowhere near the body. Or like a fireball just like looping around because it's already going to hit me. They're just waiting for the animation to catch up.
Right, like that, like when you're playing something so new, the verbosity of like what your player can do, and then you come back to this very static
Mm-hmm.
combat style. It's very jarring, definitely. You either have to like really love that type of style, kind of get stuck with it, I guess. But yeah, it's really hard to go how much we've evolved. And there are some MMOs that try to do like a lot of action-backed combat and stuff like that, and it works. But again, you still have a lot of the MMO trappings and some of the issues
Mm-hmm.
with netcode and stuff like that, so it's not like a full like action arc. They try. They
Yeah.
definitely do try.
And I would say like another thing that really epitomized this generation of MMOs, again, was the amount of time you have to spend actually playing these games. Like this was again like
Right.
you were not going to play this game for an hour a day or
No.
10 hours a week. You had to, if you wanted to get your money's worth and actually make progress, you had to spend so much time. And the thing that all like this was the thing that really was like one of the nails in the coffin for me were raids. The idea of
Yeah.
having to commit 2 to 3 hours, locked in super serious time to get some shiny shoulder piece or sword. Like I never did like a full end game raid, but I've watched like streamers who have done that stuff, and just watching that was just like I would never want to do this at all. You would have to pay me to do like a
Yeah.
raid like this.
Yeah, like yeah, I mean eventually like a lot of MMOs veered into like where's your 401k, because it is just straight, you got to straight up be fully dedicated to be on the raid, and it's a job. Like a lot of MMOs became jobs, right? Um
hmm
Everquest had very job like most MMOs have a lot of job like qualities, right? But it's like, is that really good? Like, do we really want that as an MMO? I think we
hmm
can find a balance. I think some MMOs right now are working toward it. I
hmm
where you don't have to literally spend, you could probably play an hour every day or whatever and still get, you know what I mean? Mobile's doing really good at doing that type of gameplay ability where you don't need to put your life aside, all your daily duties to level up. that
Yeah.
does sound fun. It does sound fun. Don't get me wrong. I'd love to do it, but we can't really do it.
Yeah. And when again, there's a lot we'll be talking about in the back half of our discussion about how live service and mobile games have really changed this conversation around the MMO, and even what it means to play these games long term that we'll come back to. Let's see. And to Muma's comment, yeah, the game that you're thinking of, I think that was A Tale in the Desert. And that was a game that I liked. But again, that was even more of a job than I think World of Warcraft was. And to a board fan's comment from earlier, the irony is if you don't try to be the next WoW, you have a good chance of being it. That was one of those big lessons that a lot of developers kind of tried to stick their heads in the sand and la la la, I can't hear you, and it did come back to bite a lot of them. Again, we can even translate that to the mobile space with everyone trying to be the next Angry Birds and Clash of Clans.
Yeah, I think that's literally like I think every podcast we do say that same thing. You can't be the next WoW. You can't chase that. You have to do something different or whatever. But yeah, so just trying to be a clone of WoW. All the WoW clones definitely led to that little demise area right there. But yeah, if they were trying to go in their own unique, different way, like a lot of people were in earlier MMOs, that's the reason they were successful. So they all were kind of different because we didn't know what we were really doing, or they didn't know what really would work or how to do it or what an MMO is. And all of a sudden, WoW created this MMO, and that's the template. But you can't do that again and expect the same results as well, of
And
course.
again and
And
again and
again and
again and
again
so
and
on.
again.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's when we kind of got into the middle generation of MMO. So this would be maybe like 2007 onward. This is when we kind of had like peak MMOs. So this was when all the online games came out, Star Wars, Star Trek, City of Heroes. And what we began to see, of course, was that a lot of these MMOs were just not succeeding. They may have brought in like a short term boost, but they were just not able to hang on. More importantly, they were not profitable. And
Yeah,
this,
see, the side note before I let you go, the amount of money it takes, right, to create an MMO is so much. The team, the infrastructure, the servers, everything like that. So profiting from an MMO is you gotta really have all your ducks in a line and your profit thing. And even then, what's your chances? But go ahead. Sorry.
yep, and you beat me to there, and that was one of the big factors for a lot of these games. Because when you say that I only won 20% World of Warcraft's numbers, but you are putting in, almost the amount of money that Blizzard was doing with developing World of Warcraft,
Math doesn't
those two things
work.
aren't going to add up.
Right.
And what kind of became the mantra, the MO for this kind of middle generation, was this shift to free to play. This
Yep.
idea that, okay, we tried the World of Warcraft number, it didn't work. So, how do we salvage these games? How do we try and compete in this space?
Yeah, definitely. And so again, adopting from I think mobile about that same time, right, was
Mm-hmm.
really already kind of creating that model. And they said, okay, well, free to play. Guild Wars, one of the first ones that you purchase the game and that's it. You don't play a model, so you just play the game, right? You own it and you play it. One of the first ones. And they continued to that, I think, with Guild Wars 2, right? They did the same model for that. I'm not completely sure, but I believe they did.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, but that was, converting over to the free to play model completely shifted everything up on their head. And now we have players not so favorite to hand over 14.99 every month to play for this MMO. They also want to be able to dip in and out of it, right? So like if I'm
Mm-hmm.
paying 14.99, I'm kind of shackled to the game. But if I can dip in and out without a fee, I'm more likely to play. But of course, other monetization factors, other transactions, microtransactions, things like that had to be brought into play for it to work.
Yep. And being able to have this kind of shift towards either a free play or kind of changing where the money came from was a crucial step. Again, like as we were talking about with Guild Wars, that Guild Wars famously said, we're not doing subscriptions. If you want to log on and play this game 80 hours a week, we're going to charge you the same amount as somebody who only logs on 20 minutes a week. And the whole subscription, or the kind of like the expansion model, really proved well for them. And then we can look at, but then we have on the other side all the online games that we really began to see, and this is something I talk about in the book, what would become the first generation of mobile monetization design. This idea of, everyone's favorite term, I'm sure all of you love this, fun pain. I'm sure that's something that everyone remembers and enjoys in each one of their games.
Find the fun pain points, Josh.
Exactly. And this was the style for this particular part of the MMO genre. That we're going to make the game worse, and we're going to hopefully convince you to spend more money to make the game better. And it unfortunately did work for several of those games. Lord of the Rings Online, DC Universe Online. And DC Universe Online is another very fascinating one because it just kept trying to change itself over the years. I think they've completely changed their whole subscription monetization model, at least I think 3 times over the past
4 times, yeah,
like 10, 15 years. Let's see, what was another one I was thinking of? Lord of the Rings Online. They had I think they tried to do everything. They had expansions. They had the in-game shop. They had the optional subscription fee.
Optional subscription. You could sub kinda, but you would get perks. A thing like they tried everything for it. It's still going to this day. I mean, they have ardent fans and everything, but I definitely remember them experimenting with everything.
Yeah. So here's a question for you and for the audience. One of the strategies that Sony tried to do that I think was an interesting one, excuse me, was they lumped all their subscriptions into one purchase. So if you spend $14.99 a month for Sony's plan, you get basically a subscription for every MMO that they publish. So I think you got EverQuest, you got DC Universe, you got a few other ones. I thought that was a fair trade, but even then, I still find that I think the whole subscription model thing was definitely, I think, poisoning the well for the genre as it got older and older.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I actually thought that was the future, right? That they would just umbrella their MMOs, and then I could play. All right, I pay for FF11 and FF14 with one sub or whatever, or play like you said, with DCU and then EverQuest, EverQuest 2 when it came out, all together with one sub. I guess it didn't really make it. Is it still active? Is it still kind of?
I think it is. I think particularly for Sony, I know EverQuest, the original one, is still being developed. I think they just released an expansion in 2020, 2021, something like that. And it is, I think, and again, when we talk about, I think this is probably a good segue in talking about kind of when we got to the to the mobile and free to play period. That what happened for a lot of these games was that people demanded more for less. Again, this was the whole kind of, I guess, wind blowing in of the race to the bottom.
The race to the bottom.
And I mean, we're just now, I think maybe in the last 2 years, I think, are recovering from that period. But again, the first generation of mobile and even live service games brought with it, you don't have to pay anything. Why give $14.99 a month to WoW or to EverQuest when you can play our game for free? And what we began to see, of course, and of course, to move on, what's kind of about Fortnite. When we look at kind of the big name live service games today, they are very much MMO adjacent or in that same territory of live service.
But surprisingly, I mean, still 14 right now is sub base still. I think they're doing very well, and I think WoW's doing still relatively well too. Subways, maybe kind of. I'm trying to think what other in chat could let me know what other sub base ones are doing good. But RS. 14 WoW and RS, but I know 14 is probably doing the best sub-based
Yeah, I think
right
when
now.
I looked this up for the book, I think 14 is sitting at about like 2.4, 2.5 million subs. I think WoW's down to 2.1, something along those lines. And
Wow.
again, remember,
Wow.
World of Warcraft at a time was pulling in over
Wow.
14 million subs.
Oh wow. I should double check this. Wow. Okay. If it's like that then Josh, that's a different story, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is, I think, again, what we began to see this change in terms of how people try to adopt things. Because, again, I think the problem as we entered the 2010s was you couldn't get away with a flat subscription rate anymore. Again, World of
Yeah.
Warcraft got away with it because it was the first, or the first one to
Right.
blow up that big.
Grandfathered in, they had so many people that were like, "Well, I've been doing it for 8 years. I'll keep doing it." So, you know.
And before everyone else, there was just no way. And then,
Mhm.
of course, the bigger issue came with content generation. And this is something I know we've spoken about. I know I made several videos on is that when you're trying to compete with somebody else, you're competing with them at their peak. So if you try to break into World of Warcraft's market, I hope you have 8 to 10 years of content expansions, updates, and refinements in your game.
Right, because like I think Cory Borglar famously said it when we're building the game, you're launching the spaceship and you're building it while it's launching. But like World of Warcraft, they got satellites like orbiting and they're dropping down content. You know what I mean? You're just trying to get launched into outer space. They got that thing on lock around you. So yeah, you have to have years and years and years, like we were talking about in the last one, of content. And how are you going to do it far beyond? And even then, man, good luck because you're going
Mm-hmm.
against big money, big fan base, and stuff like that. So I think that's why people are definitely scared. If you want to get into the MMO space,
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely hard to get into, right? You got to be ready and you got to bring the big,
Oh
the
yes.
big stuff.
And one thing that we didn't touch on, I think, is an interesting point to bring up, especially about kind of where MMOs began, was the idea of having a virtual economy. And this is something that we can, easily see the tendrils or the roots into NFTs and all of what's happening
Yeah.
today. But again, like Ramin and I, we've had this discussion before. Like Ramin made a lot of his money both in EverQuest and Eve Online. When he was playing EverQuest, he ran a service where he would run in and help people whose characters would die in raids and high level places, and they
Oh
paid him
my.
for it. And I
Wow.
just love that story. And like with Eve Online, he made so much money that I think he supposedly got banned from the game because they thought he was cheating. But he was like so good at the game, he like got he made so much off of that. And
Wow.
again, this was something that you would like because of those stories particularly. So many MMO designers swore off of a virtual economy. They
Yeah.
tried to break that system up, but as we all know, it didn't work. All it did was create this black market of gold
Right.
farmers, item sellers.
Bots and bots and bots.
Hmm.
Right.
And
Yeah.
the ironic thing, of course, is that ever since Blizzard had tried to stamp that down, they've been trying to bring it back. They tried with the
Yeah.
auction house in Diablo 3 and
Yeah.
now with Diablo Immortal. So
Right.
it was one of those cases where, because we weren't making enough money, we shut it down, but now we want to make more money, we can't get it back up.
Right. And I don't know how you feel about it, but I feel like they're trying to bring, okay, they try to stamp it down. It's no matter what you do, it's going to exist. It's one of those things that's going to exist. There's assets in this game that are people are going to try, and it's time and money. And do you have more money or you have more time? Well, we can bot that out for you. Here's your gold and your whatever. I think that in my heart, I believe that some way somehow it would be really neat if we could have it to make, like Rami was saying, where you could actually make money from a game. That would be really neat and cool. How it would be possible, I don't know, but I
Yeah.
think in Utopia it could be possible.
Yeah, like again, like we talk about money through an MMO. Second Life is probably one of the quintessential examples, and of
Right.
course, EVE Online. Again, we
EVE
can't talk about
Online.
a player-based economy without mentioning EVE Online. Then we would really get the pitchforks and torches out against us on that one. And yeah, like
Right.
that was one of those major aspects of these games is that people are willing to spend money if they see that there's value. If there is value in, instead of me spending 10 hours and to get my character back, I can just pay you $15 or whatever and you do it for me in the next 5 minutes. There's
Exactly.
value in that for me.
Hmm.
And this again really goes back to that talk that Valve did about Team Fortress 2, that there is always time and money. Those are the two things that you can essentially tax someone on in
Hmm.
any virtual or any video game based design. And a lot of the MMOs, and I think this is kind of that very interesting point I'm thinking about now, MMOs clearly put the scale on time. They want you to spend hours and hours playing these games so that you're going to have that kind of built in over time investment of $15 a month and then another 15. And
Hmm.
then mobile games clearly went for the money scale. That, hey, you want this awesome cool character? Give us $49.99. You want all this cred? $99.99 is the best deal. Or, you can get this amazing 6-star character, but the pity is at 150 pools and it's, $30 for like 50 pools or something like that.
So you can't do it, Josh. I can't.
And this was where we saw how these markets really changed. That with the idea or with the growth of live service games, that people wanted to spend money on stuff that had value to it. That $15 a month for simply just, the day pass to Disney World, who cares about that when we have all these other theme parks open? Well, if I can,
Right.
spend $30 or $20 and I get, this amazing sword, or I can buy my own house, or get my guild hall in
Hmm.
order, that is something like that. Again, when we use the word tangible, we also mean in the real world, but it's something that we can see and experience in the game. This is the same, again, allure of the gotcha and hero collectors that, I'm not just playing this basic character. I have all these 6 stars and SSRs and all that. And look what I can do in my account. Look what I can do in this world.
Yeah, and I think people are definitely being consistent too. Like when you're saying, okay, fine, I have the Disney Pass for a month, but then what am I gonna do? I don't really have anything, or maybe I don't have any time.
Hmm.
The mobile game, again, like you say, I only got 15 minutes. I'm gonna buy my awesome sword, and then I'm gonna go blah blah blah, and I'm done. And to them, again, you're buying that tangible thing. You're getting not
Hmm.
well, tangible for you. You own it, you have it, and that's it. And you've completed something. For some, that might mean more completionist than just, I don't know, sitting idly in an MMO and not knowing what you're going to do.
Yeah. And I think the investment is, again, another interesting parallel between live service, mobile, and MMOs. That when you're playing a mobile game, you can, do your daily tasks, or you should be able to do your daily tasks within like 30 minutes, maybe like
Right.
45 minutes to an hour. That's it.
15, please.
Yeah, me too. When you play an MMO, you, again, like as we all know, here's another favorite phrase of mine, the real game begins at 60 or
Yes.
80 or
80.
level 150 if they keep
Yeah.
raising it up. And
What
yeah.
Once you start rating, that's the end game. Yeah, you're there.
Oh,
Real game.
good. Yeah.
Real game.
And I think this is a good point to bring up Chris's comment about how MMO players suddenly became more aware of design tricks to keep them on the treadmill. And this was another big point about MMOs, and we talk about this kind of soulless period, is that
Yeah.
every single MMO had the same exact progression, the same
Yeah.
exact beginnings, and okay, here you have to start doing this basic quest. Here's 20 rats or 20 low level thugs or whatever.
Mhm.
And now you do all these quests. Great, you're level 20. Here's something special. Now get to level 40. And like we said, for a lot of these games, the real game didn't begin until you reach end cap. And this was again one of those very interesting aspects. Some MMOs went extreme, level 80, level 120. DC Universe Online, from my memory, I think they only had a cap at level 20 or level 30, but then they created the whole loot gear rating grind, where you couldn't do it raids unless you had high enough of a gear score. But the only way to get that gear score is to grind earlier raids to hopefully get the pieces that you need to then go to new raids to then grind those pieces. And then your mind, you can start to feel like the blood leaking out of your ears at that point.
Yeah, the gear treadmill, every single one, and so you get into the MMO and you're like, okay, when is the gear treadmill? Eventually, after the rats and everything, and like when is the treadmill gonna start? You were on it all along. You just didn't know.
The real grind was the friends we made along the way.
This is true, Pug. You are correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And pizza. It's pizza this time.
Yep, and to Chris's comment, that's again the other major challenge of MMOs, and I think we all want pizza. Like, this was the major challenge that MMOs I don't think they quite had the answer to, that I think live service games have really kind of outpaced them on, is late game. Late game slash end game. What do you do? So for a lot of live service games, we introduce new story content. We introduce new challenges. The early to mid stuff, that stuff is locked. We set that in stone. We never touch it. But now we're going to keep adding in more content. We're not adding more levels. We're just adding more stuff for you to do. And again, like for hero collectors, champion-based games, there's always a new champion. There's always a new SSR. There's another version of Goku and Dragon Ball that we can keep adding to these games. And for the MMOs, this is where I think they really began to feel outpaced. Because you weren't getting brand new content from an MMO every month or two. You got that with an expansion. But those expansions can take, 6 to 8 months, maybe even more than that, to fully develop, play test, iterate, and get out.
I think when they were first starting, it was like a year, almost a year and a half. Then they started shrinking it down a little bit more, 12, 8 months. And then, but yeah, like it takes a long time before you get to that content. And even then, that content took, 6 months, a year to make. Again, like we said last time, they'll chew through it in a day. People will chew through it so fast that it's really hard to keep up with that rat race. And like you said, mobile has that down.
Yep. I mean, when you look at stuff like even like Dead by Daylight and a lot of the live service games, a new character and a new map can do wonders for these games. Because again, as we said, the actual time you spend playing them is 30 minutes to an hour. So you're not trying to make that 30-minute to an hour play 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours. You're just trying to make that more varied. And you can do that with a lot less compared to an MMO where now they say, okay, we're going to add 10 more levels of expansion, which means we need 10 more levels of dungeons, 10 more levels of raids, 10 more levels of gear and all that. And then what happens when it's done?
12 classes that need balancing between all that time. We need to add new things because you got 10 more levels. What are we going to add? What is going to be, oh my word.
And then insane. It's done. And then the day two, okay, what else you got? When's the next expansion coming?
When's the next one happening?
Yep. And I mean, again, like with even some of the mobile games I play, that these are games that they may have I'm talking like major update to it. Maybe 2 months, maybe 4 months, something like that. But they keep giving something, they keep bringing some new event back, maybe every 2 to 4 weeks. So you're always having that idea of, okay, I'm doing something new, but there's something else on the horizon. And then something really in the horizon is, their major, 4 month, 6 month event. And then when that's done, we get back to 2 months or 2 weeks, 4 weeks, and so on. And an MMO could not do that. And I know that because DC Universe Online famously said, oh, we're going to release expansion level content each and every month.
every month. They said every month. I
Yeah,
thought it
we're
was
going to
3
do.
at first.
No, it
Oh
was
wow,
every
yeah.
month. And after about 2 months, they were like, we
We
can't do
can't do
this.
this.
We can't do this anymore. And yeah, it's one of the big things about these live service games, and something that I think I made a video on, and something I'm sure we'll be talking about in the future. You have to be very economical with the content that you develop. You can't just say, I'm only going to work on one thing a year. It's going to be this one big thing, and then for the other 11 out of 12 months, you guys get nothing.
Right.
It
No, you
doesn't
have
work
to
like
have.
that.
It doesn't work. Have no. You have to have a lot. You have to be working on a lot of stuff. Your competition is very fierce.
And,
You constantly have to be adding. If it's just a quality of life, little
mm-hmm.
improvements, customization, you name it. You have to constantly working on it with MMOs. It is just a grinder of content.
Yeah, and to Chris's comment about if they would ever add a roguelike expansion, I mean, a roguelike mode is now like almost either standard or coming soon for so many mobile and live service games. Um,
Really?
I just saw someone mention that Arknights is going to bring their roguelike mode to the global servers, I think, in the next 2 to 3 months.
Hmm.
So it is a very popular feature. And again, like, it's an idea of these games changing. And I think that this is kind of the issue for a lot of the MMOs, or kind of when we have peak MMOs, that they never really changed. Yes,
Yeah.
they added in new stories, they've added in new stuff, but 9 times out of 10, if you played a MMO, year one of it, and you're year 5 or year 10, it's still mostly going to be the same experience. It's the same treadmill.
Or if you've played an MMO, you've almost kind of played them all, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like because they're all so similar. So that's one of the things. That's another sad point about it is that
Mm-hmm.
no one really tries to push the boundaries anymore. It's real. I mean, I imagine
Mm-hmm.
if I was in charge of making an MMO, I'm not sure what I would do. Pushing the boundaries. The whoever was paying me would be like, "You make a WoW clone exactly," or so. I'm not sure how it would go, but yeah, no one's pushing the boundaries anymore, really changing. I think that's what we need to talk about. A little bit about where we can go from them, but they need to change. I mean, that's like you said, the one thing I've heard everybody telling me when they play other than subscription and stuff like that it's the same thing. What am I doing? Why am I chopping the tree? Why am I
Mm-hmm.
chopping the rats? And like I got to get to level 80 and then it's fun. So yeah, those are definitely the downfalls.
And I think right there, I won't get to Pug's question in a second, but I think what you just said there is one of the biggest aspects about why the MMO genre really took a nosedive. In an MMO, I have to get to level 50, 60, 70, 80, and then the real game starts. In a mobile or live service game, the real game starts within maybe 20 minutes, maybe 40 minutes of playing that game. And then I've, done my tutorial, I've done my onboarding, we begin the game proper. And it is, again, that one of the things I think we've really seen, I think not just in this genre, but in game development as a whole, is that people don't want to spend a lot of time trying to get into a game. If I can't enjoy your game within 40 seconds of playing, why should I keep playing? Why, again, for someone like me, I have 3,000 plus games on my Steam library. I am not running out of games to play for some time. So if your game annoys me in any way, shape, or form,
Yeah.
what's keeping me playing? It's not going to be your name. It's not going to be the amount of money. I just go play something else.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even if I'm like your biggest fan, or I mean, I don't know, maybe, but yeah, definitely could always just play something else.
Yeah, to Pug's comment about the sandbox MMO age, are you referring to games like Ark and like that period? Because I know a few of the kind of sandbox style games, but that was one thing I don't really know too much about.
There wasn't too many that happened. Social aspect
I
will.
mean, obviously, we talk about communal metaverse kind of thing. Second Life would be a huge aspect of that. Yeah, so that kind of thing. And, like, that was, I think, another interesting aspect of that divide in the MMO space is like the PvP or very combat centric ones where you get invaded, they can destroy your entire month's project or even years worth of stuff. And again, that
Right.
was that very big point about EVE Online, that I'm sure we've all read stories of how corpse in that game, went this huge round. They took like millions of actual money. Oh,
Oh,
Black
real
Desert, the
funny.
idle MMOs.
Idle MMOs. I've been trying to. It's famous and popular. Okay, Sandbox. Star Wars Galaxies.
The original Star Wars Galaxy very much had that kind of, you're living in this world. So, you need
Oh
housing.
yeah, the
Yeah, and
2003 one.
yeah, when they relaunched it, it went very much like traditional MMO,
Yeah.
combat centric, that kind of thing. And that's a very interesting point about kind of like the sandboxy, more, I guess, like, would be, I guess maybe like slice of life kind of
Yes.
MMOs.
Yes.
I,
Like you start,
mhm,
you do it. You build the things. You can kind of do whatever you want to. Housing, just all things are kind of available. Like you said, slice of life. They were trying to take off for a while, but I never really saw them like take foot. I think that one of the things that people run into is decision paralysis. So when you give them just too many decisions in an MMO, I think
mhm.
people had trouble with that. I think people are more akin to a theme park MMO
Yeah.
than they are to a sandboxy. So that's probably why they didn't really take off.
Yeah, I think that was the thing for me. And like I always say, that I need to see,
Yeah,
that carrot on the stick. I need to
right.
see where I'm going to end up. And I think it's the same reason why like The Sims never hooked me. That I don't like to play like goalless games. Like I need to
Yeah, what are you
have
doing?
something, even if it's like some crazy goal like make $10 million, working in The Sims. Like if I don't have that something to push forward to, I kind of lose my interest. Like one of the things I always like about the Anno games is that they always have these variety of goals. So you're not just building; you're trying to get to the final technology and stuff like that. And yeah, to the discussion about kind of like the theme park MMO design again, like when we talk about kind of like that soulless nature, we really began to see all these developers just trying to hit the same nail on the head with the same hammer, and it just really wasn't working out for them. Chris mentioned Black Desert Online. I tried playing that last year when I was working on the book on live service games, and like to me, that felt so soulless because it is just it's like a lot of the idle MMO design that you just hit a button, your character runs over there, he does the quest. You may have to push a few buttons, and then you move on to the
Yeah.
next quest. And it's an idea. I think the theme park analogy is a really good one. That a lot of MMOs feel so heavily curated. We've been having discussion about Elden Ring. We brought Pizza and Elden Ring back into this discussion where
Yes.
we've hit it here. But one of the things that a lot of people have, said about Elden Ring succeeding so well is that it's very much guideless. You
Yeah.
can, if you want to go that way, or that way at the start, you can do that. The game is not popping up saying you are not high enough level or you must have done this, this, and this in order to go to Khalid. You
Right.
can, if you want to walk. I did that with my fourth character. If you want to just walk straight to Khalid, I bought like the punching knuckles, and I went back and started just beating up all the bosses. I did that with my character, and
Yeah, like
yeah,
the older style MMOs definitely like it was like you had to figure out exactly what to do. Go to forums, go to wikis, talk to people. Like there was no floating arrows or things popping up over people's heads. So a lot of it
mm,
was community based. Like quests that have never been figured out before, people had to get together and talk. So a lot of
mm-hmm,
bonding and cool stuff would happen. And now I think that as of course, like, WoW, one of the main things they did, of course, was take all the pain points out, which would be, I don't know where to go, I don't know what to do, tell me what to do, because it would be easier if you just tell me what to do when I go do it. And so creating, I'm going to say accessibility or
there'll be more
e
approachability.
approachability, and I'm
Yeah,
sorry, not accessibility, sorry, ease of access. I don't know, approachability.
easeability, something like approachability. Yeah,
Something like that. Okay, so just like doing that and then removing all those pain points from people, and then it just kind of started heading that way for all of them after that.
and I mean, as a very interesting parallel, a lot of that curated nature, we could easily see how that kind of diluted down into AAA games. with a lot of AAA games, falling into like the same kind of basic gameplay systems. How many open world single player games did we play where there's conveniently placed paint that it will tell you all the climbable ledges or all the things that you can actually interact with? And again, it's that case of the first game, it works because it's the first game.
Same.
When you're the 15th, 30th, 100th game doing that,
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to work.
Yeah. Definitely. Like you're gonna look at the yellow paint and be like, "Oh my God, does every game have to do this?" Like,
Yeah. And again, to Chris's comment from earlier about how so many MMOs try to disguise the carrot or disguise that treadmill,
Yeah.
it doesn't work. And consumers, again, they have gotten very good at spotting these issues. I know some people may argue against, I know some developers may try that, but consumers these days, they can spot when there's problems with these games. And
That.
when they spot it, they're going to tell their friends. Or if they're a well known streamer or YouTuber, they're going to shout it from their respective channels.
Yep.
And I think in today's market, I know either we did this or we still do so about kind of how streamer and YouTuber culture has really changed things.
No, we need to do that one.
That the kind of, grace period of your game has been cut dramatically short because we don't have to wait for PC Gamer or for Nintendo Power, in a month from now to tell us if a game is good or bad or not. We'll know sometimes, 3 days before that game is released. I mean, I think you guys were mentioning New World earlier, or I was remembering that the MMO or the other game from the ARC developers that people were, shouting, damning things about, like, I think like a week or two before its release, because all those early players got in, they were like, oh my God, this is terrible. And guess what? Everyone heard about that negative day one to that game's launch.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And again, like the first day launch, is super important. We will harp on that again. And no one is going to take pity on if your MMO day one doesn't work. Like ever. If you're ever go down, if things go down, people just they won't stand for that anymore.
Yep. And again,
Just-
with the sheer number of games being released these days, you don't have that benefit. And like we've said, the cost of development has gone up, but people expect more for less.
Yes, yeah.
And I think that's been one of the things that's kind of kept a lot of the MMOs out of the, or newer MMOs, I should say, from really taking on, is that as a new MMO with no built-in consumer base, with no WoW or Final Fantasy numbers, how do we make money? How do we literally make money with this game if we can't do a subscription, and if we can't do pain points or fun pain? What do we do? And like Guild Wars 2, I think is probably like one of the few games that have answered that question.
Yeah, definitely. With
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right. How even Amazon's new MMOs, like day one we're having server problems like massive, and they're like, we didn't expect that many people. You should. What's fun pain?
Fun pain, I think I said. I may have extended that out there. Fun paying is what they want you to do in gacha games. Make it fun to spend money there.
Yes.
And I think this is a good time. We're about an hour in. We should definitely at least. I do want to at least spend a few more minutes talking about kind of how the mobile live service has really eaten into these games. Because I think this will be a good set for the final part, talking about where can the future of MMOs be and if there is a future for it. So when we get into the 2010s, particular, kind of the MMO market, I think this is what we kind of seen. It has become very solidified that the games that were still around kind of locked it down. Again, Final Fantasy XIV, Lord of the Rings, Star Trek Online, World of Warcraft. And that even like during like the peak of Kickstarter, we were seeing developers trying to pitch MMOs. That was
Yeah,
always fun. We're a new 12-person team and we want to build an MMO the size of Everquest. Can you
that
give us
was
$200,000 for
so
that?
wild. I think what WildStar one of the ones that did that? I think WildStar was
Hmm.
like the last one that I was like, yeah, they're gonna have to stop right now. I think WildStar was the last one.
Hmm. Yeah, and to Chris' comment, and that was one thing I was saying that a lot of the AAA single player games during the 2010s, even to this day, have definitely borrowed elements of MMO design or MMO pacing. You know, the whole gear rating system, having to level up your account.
Almost everything's an MMO now, kind of. It's really starting to bleed, right?
Everything is a roguelike or an MMO these
Roguelike,
days.
everything's an RPG, everything's a an Elden Ring wannabe.
Hmm. Well, not yet. We have to at least
Not
get
yet.
another
We've
like
got
six
another
months.
year, 6 more months, then we'll be there.
Yeah. Yep. And yet, like NC Soft at a time, like they were like one of the kings.
They were huge, huge then.
Yep, they publish a lot of games. I just looked up Lineage they publish. I don't know who here still remembers that one from. Oh, there is a new
I do.
Lineage. And they
Lineage
did
2.
City of Heroes, Auto Assault, so on and so forth.
They had like I think what and yeah, because they were the ones that was doing the subscription. So you could subscribe to all of the MMOs. And I think at one time it was like 8 or 9. Like they had all these little weird ones that I've never seen, but they had just every MMO they could under their
Yeah,
umbrella for a time.
yeah. And to board fans come, yep. Again, a lot of games, especially in the mobile space, I've said they're MMOs, but you don't ever have to interact with someone, and you can just
Right,
turn to autoplay and watch
right.
things go. And yeah, I remember that I think there was a Kickstarter from one of the creators of EverQuest
hmm
that either it failed or it came out and like there were all these issues with it and it just, died within like a few months.
Was
And
that the one that was supposed to have like text to speech, like you would talk to it? I
not
think so.
sure. But it was such again, like when we get into the 2010s that live service games have really taken the place of MMOs. Like we said, when we talk about what is peak MMO today, we're looking at maybe just over 2 million subscribers.
Mhm.
And even then, when we look at kind of like peak mobile games, we're talking like the top gotcha games or the top mobile stuff along those lines, they are making serious money each month. And they don't need subscriptions. Of course, as we've been talking about in chat, battle passes have become one of like the new, or I should say, old new strategies of live service games. Let's see.
Request next landmark.
No, I do not remember that one. Yeah, and I think that's another very big point about a lot of these games. Like when they die, you can't play them anymore. When they shut these servers down, and again, if we get on the discussion about game preservation, we'll be here till like 10 o'clock tonight.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah. Just quick point. I mean, again, like I think all MMOs. I don't. I mean, morally, I know morally it doesn't have anything to do in business, but at the end of a life for an MMO, you should always hand it over to the fans at the end, giving them a way to host their servers and run them if you're closing it down for financial reasons. Because again, these are some MMOs that is their life, and I don't think it's that good of a thing for a company for goodwill to just cancel a game, kill a game that people have spent 8 years, 10 years, 20 years of their life in, right? So some way to allow people to have private servers after close is that's all I'm going to say about that. I think that's definitely should be enforced.
Hmm. And yeah, let me scroll back up here. You have two Pug's comment. Again, it is about the money. If we release a game and it's costing us $5 million a month to maintain, support, and development, we're only making $800,000 each month. We're going to be out of the studio very short. And again, this was a very big point about how even live service and mobile games have really had to change their strategy. That we can't count on us becoming the next Clash of Clans or the next World of Warcraft. We need to figure out what can we do we can become that standard, and then we own that respective market. Whether it is a game like Dead by Daylight, like Ark Knights, like Genshin Impact, and so on. And again, we kind of get back into that cycle of one game dominating the conversation, then either people try to directly compete with it and they fail, or they do their own thing, and now we have another standard over here.
Right. That's the way to go. Many different standards as possible.
Yeah. And I guess to discussing this about like what can the future bring, I guess the big question is there room for a new MMO? And when we say new MMO, we're not talking about World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy 14. I mean, like, can a game that has never been seen before come out as an MMO and, survive and thrive? People have been talking about that New World game, and I have heard, like, nothing about it in, like, the last few months. And again, like, the month before it came out, everybody was talking about it.
Yeah, it was massive. You couldn't like open up YouTube without seeing something about it. But I literally I thought I forgot about the game almost. Um, the future, I'm kind of like, I don't know what kind of mechanics or changes that could be done to an MMO, or what spaces like, or what hasn't already been changed with like mobile game development. I am
Mm-hmm.
kind of sad to say, I feel like it might, like, the next thing would have to be with like, maybe with like VR. I feel like that's a cop out, but I feel like that would, for the next major change in MMOs, I think it's like we'd have to, it'd probably be VR. I think that's where a lot of people are trying to go. It, they're trying to make it the metaverse, all that stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
definitely, I think that's where it's going to be headed, whether we want it to or not. That's just my feeling.
Yeah. And again, with a lot of the MMO space, it's hard to see somebody making something new. And I just don't see, like, in the same kind of vein as, a World of Warcraft, or a game that's built on very long tail kind of gameplay loops. I think working in the market, again, we were talking 30 years ago, I think it would be a different story. I think, as
Yeah.
we've said, and maybe there's a topic, great talk about this, about kind of like the mystery of a lot of these games has gone away. Again, in Elden
Yeah.
Ring, like, imagine playing Elden Ring 30 years ago, before the likes of YouTube and streamers, and trying to figure all that stuff out.
I mean, like, the only way you could find out information was talking to your friends or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That would be amazing. Like, that would be like one of the most pivotal life events in most people's lives. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But yeah, I think the mystery, that's kind of like the sad part, is the mystery is gone for a lot of these genres. Like, the allure, and when it was a new
Mm-hmm.
mystery of MMOs was like, oh my god, what is possible? What are we going to be able to do? And then as it kept going on and the money machine started coming in, and we started to see, okay, well, this is kind of as far as it'll be able to go.
Yeah.
Um,
And again, like, the communal aspect. This was again something that Rami and I spoken about at length. Like, the idea that we can play with people and experience this game together without being hampered by monetization or confusing systems, and even just, again, like, the amount of people playing at one time. But again, like, people were saying how amazing battle royale is when it's 100 people. On peak servers, there could be hundreds of thousands of people playing at one time. And I'm curious again, and as we've said, the investment is still, I think, one of the major issues. You have games like Path of Exile and Warframe, who they have zero upfront costs. You
yep.
literally can play those games for free, and they have made money hand over fist.
Mm-hmm.
So if you try to sell me an MMO that is, $10 a month, or full of microtransactions, or annoying to play, again, why? Why should I give you money?
Right. And I think really like the only thing like for like the remaining, there's not a lot of MMOs that are big and pulling in money that are subs. But I think for those, like it's just it's the IP, right? And then just, fans have been with those IPs for a long time. There's not a lot of I can't really name a new one that's come to a market that's become a juggernaut that hasn't already been an established IP. Um, because it's really hard to press into the market.
Mm-hmm. Now, one.
Also,
Yep.
someone wanted me to say that Elden Ring is the best MMO, and I'm
There you go.
that was
I've.
me. That was myself.
I'm curious how Elder Scrolls Online is, and this was mentioned a few times in chat. I did not play ESO, or I spent like 2 hours playing Fallout 76 and just didn't
Oh
enjoy that one.
wow. Oh, I was like woo, like 2 minutes in Fallout 76. The wife has actually spent a little time playing ESO, but I haven't touched it yet myself. I just knew about the real rocky launch with the bots and the monetizations and all that stuff. But if it's going good and strong, I'd love to hear that. I'd love to hear any MMO still prospering.
Hmm. And I think kind of where MMOs need to go, again,
Hmm.
is that they need to look at the live service model, not just in terms of monetization, but in terms of content creation.
Hmm.
But of course, the problem is that an MMO is such a larger space. And,
Huge scale.
in a mobile game, if we add in, 5 new stages, that's, a little bit of content right here. If we say, let's add in a new city, that's, we gotta completely, terraform and recreate the land, some section of our world, and put that in.
Hmm. Exactly. Huge difference in that. I think one important thing, it might be for another topic, but I think like if you're looking for inspiration in game design, I know it might be hard to, but mobile, like looking at the mobile space is an amazing place to look for mechanics, to look for like
Mm-hmm.
monetization ideas. Uh, and one of the main reasons are how to do it right, how to do it wrong. And one of the main reasons is there's so much money being poured into the mobile market because, like you were saying, these people are making hand and fist money just
Mm-hmm.
over and over. So if you really want to go in there and study and find out proper ways to do things, content delivery, things like that, the mobile places is just a wealth of information to see. And just like you were saying, like you had a book on that for that very reason, you know?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. Let's see. Yeah, and again, like the MMO genre is one of those genres where I think you're either a fan or you're not. Like
Right.
it's not a genre that I think that converts people.
No.
In the same ways when we look at, a lot of single player driven games that, you know, we all have that one, the one roguelike that got everyone to play, or the one look at Elden Ring again, that a lot of people view Elden Ring as their first Souls like, that they did not touch this genre for the last 10 plus years.
Right.
And Elden Ring got them to play. Much like how Sid Meier's Civilization, I think, really kickstarted a lot of people getting into 4X slash grand strategy games. With the MMO, and I think this was, of course, one of the issues with MMO games, is that if you don't like World of Warcraft, you're not going to like anything else because
Right.
everyone tried to build that same model. And again, this is the converse point of live service games. That in a live service game, if I don't like Clash of Clans, I can go play this one. If I don't like Dragon Ball Legends, I can go play this game and this game. And again, it's all about having these different experiences. So I'm not just playing 20 different takes on Angry Birds. Because again, a lot of people try to create the next Angry Birds. And of course, the next Flappy Bird when that blew up. Yep, and to Chris's comment, again, like this is what we talked about with kind of this divergence between mobile and live service games. That the live service games really nail that moment to moment gameplay. They
Yeah.
want that 10 to 30 minute gameplay chunk to be so enjoyable that you want to play it every day, or you want to play multiple times a day. Like, let's say you have a few moments, after dinner or before you do something, I do another 15 to 20 minute run. in
And
an
like
M.
Chris is saying right
Yep.
here about take away the care like of a laundry list of chores, and how he's saying that they're
Hmm.
chores. So
Yep.
like all the WoW players I know, they were like, "Oh, I gotta do my dailies." Like no one was happy to log in and to do the same thing over and over. You know what I mean? So
and
yeah,
and
definitely.
that's why so many live service games have gone multiplayer, because again, it's player generated content. If I summon to Dead by Daylight and I play as one killer, I can have 10 different experiences depending upon
Yeah,
what the other groups are. And then if I
right.
change to another killer, that
Totally
completely
different.
changes anything.
And another map, totally different. A different map, different killer, awesome, different players, totally different.
A new champion in League of Legends or
Hmm.
Dota, a new
Hmm.
character in a gacha game.
Hmm.
That you're changing the moment to moment gameplay. In an
Right.
MMO, yep, go ahead.
And an MMO, like if you're the dungeon doing the dungeon, you're not gonna have a different experience in the dungeon. It's the same thing, same boss mechanics, same stuff. Even if the players are a little bit different, everybody's following the same thing, right? So
Like, yeah, like I said, the idea of doing like a 30-person raid in World of Warcraft, that sounds like
one of these
torture
days,
to
me and you
me.
are gonna have to do a raid. We'll go do a raid in 14 or something.
There we go. Yep, and to Chris's comment again, like this is one of the things that I've said a lot about Souls-like combat is that I want to see more developers really embrace that fidelity, that moment-to-moment gameplay.
Yeah,
It's why I
yeah.
played Sea of Heroes for so long, because I like this idea that I can watch my character punch and shoot lasers and knock guys around. The combat of Star Trek Online when I first played it, I really love being able to have to change, which side my shields were and what weapons I'm using, and it was real time. A City of Heroes.
City of
Yeah.
Heroes.
And again, like I keep saying that I never played Auto Assault, but I still wish I had a chance to play that one during its peak. And again, like so many MMOs, the moment to moment gameplay never hooked me. Same
No.
reason why so many open world games never worked for me.
And I think like that's one of like it was almost accepted. It's like you're not playing an MMO for moment to moment gameplay. It's like it was totally known. Everyone knows the combat's terrible. Everyone knows
Mm.
most of the things are lame, and it was kind of an accepted thing, or still is, right? And I always found that so strange in MMOs.
Like I said earlier, the World of Warcraft moment, I'm just like chopping like on a wood node for like 5 minutes. Like, why the heck am I doing this? Like, what is wrong with me? I'm giving them money to do this, and this was back when I had time.
Right.
These days I don't have that time to spend 5 minutes chopping a tree down for
I
four
know.
planks. Oh, I'm going to challenge everyone here. Who here played Earth and Beyond back in the day?
Ooh, no.
Westwood Studios MMO
Oh,
that
oh,
sadly
oh.
put them out of business afterwards.
Wow. What's this called?
Earth and Beyond.
Earth and Beyond.
Because I played that one and I did enjoy it for some time. But again, this was the other big problem that if your MMO is popular, and we're saying, but when we say popular, there's only maybe 200,000 subscribers, maybe fewer than that. Thank you, Bucky. Yes, okay. But again, like if you're only pulling in 200,000 subscribers a month of money, and it's costing 600,000, maybe 1.5 million subscribers a month to actually maintain it, it doesn't matter how great your game is. People aren't. It's not financially viable, and it's why, just like for a lot of the market, that it became dominated by the big names, the ones who had so much money they could throw in, and they were
Yeah.
earning so much money that they just kept feeding back into it. I mean, right now we are recording this June 4th. I know like Twitter is going crazy over some new like Fortnite content right now.
Yeah.
And again, Epic has sunk a ton of money into Fortnite, and it has earned money hand over fist, and it has afforded them that opportunity. And yeah, someday we do need to play Final Fantasy 14 because I want to see actually, has it, where is it at now in terms of everything. Because again, like I said, my friend Ken, he hated the original launch. It was so much I wrote like a college essay about how much he hated Final Fantasy 14.
It's the original, the 1.0, right?
Yeah.
You need to find that for me.
And again, it's that issue of, for a lot of these MMOs, and even a lot of live service games, you don't have a lot of time to waste trying to get people invested in it. If your game is not knocking it out of the park within the first month, it's probably already on life support for some of these games.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and you can see it like with the Amazon, with New World. I don't know how Lost Ark is. I don't how that one's doing either. Um, but I mean, it doesn't matter how big your studio is, how much money you throw in either. You gotta be big to play in the big MMO game, like just for the amount of content. Um,
Yeah, we did do
well,
an episode about open world
open
games, I'm
worlds,
pretty
yes,
sure. And to
yeah,
board fan, and if we know of some MMO creators, I'm always looking for people to talk to for these chats.
yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
and again, the investment is such a big point as to why these games either blow up or they blow down or they implode in on themselves. Either have the success or you have the Hindenburg.
Right, the Hindenburg.
I would love to talk to Ralph Coaster. I did talk to Ernest Adams a few years ago. Yeah, and as we had this discussion, we're probably going to wrap things up in the next few minutes. So I know we're approaching an hour and a half. It is very interesting how the parallels between live service and mobile have really changed, I think, what people expect out of games, and why I think a lot of the MMOG genre just did not manage to keep going. And again, like World of Warcraft at this point, it's too big, I think, to change. We talk about this a lot with like the mobility and the agility of an independent developer.
Right, right.
That World of Warcraft can't just say we're going to change our combat system. Somewhere right now, a Blizzard developer just had a heart attack as I just uttered those words. And I know they did have like I think this was back in like 2008, 2010. They did like this huge like new player experience, complete rework of the entire World of Warcraft line. And again, it helped, but it's not changing that moment to moment gameplay. And it is again such a really interesting, I think discussion about people who play MMOs. You're not really attracting someone who doesn't like an MMO to your game. Whereas with a
Yeah.
live service game, if you don't like gameplay A, we have 10,000 other varieties that you can go to.
Yeah, there's so many different flavors that you can go to in live service. They pare down this, take this out, add this in. But with an MMO, it's pretty much like this is what you're getting. There might be a little less transaction here or a little, the geared, treadmill might be a little different, but you're going to
Mm-hmm.
get on it eventually, and eventually that's going to come up. So they're pretty much just kind of static in how they are. So like we were saying, if like where are they going to go in the future? Kind of wondering where you think they might be headed.
I don't know. I think the only ways that they can reasonably go is either, completely new core gameplay loop, or they really need to borrow as many pages as they can from mobile and live service games.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
an MMO that focuses on the moment to moment gameplay. Again, we were joking about, Elden Ring MMO. That
Hmm.
may not be so far apart.
Right.
Imagine an MMO with Elden Ring's combat and exploration and full on developed around PvP.
Hmm.
Imagine playing a PvP MMO with Elden Ring's core gameplay loop in it.
Right. And like quest progression, like kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff, like no, like um, just not a very not all the theme park trappings, right, that are
Mm-hmm.
there.
Yeah, but again, for somebody to do that, they're going to need to spend a lot of money and a lot of resources on that game.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't succeed within like the first 2 to 3 weeks, maybe a little bit more than that, it's very hard to compete. And yet, to a board fan's comment, like PvP is oftentimes like one of the more controversial, polarizing comments or aspects of these games. Some
Yeah.
people want to play an MMO just to explore. They just
Yeah.
want, again, like, the exploration of these games is very simple. Oop, everything just froze for a second. But they want to just see the world. Again, we talk about what it wasn't the I forget the test that was about, like, the different players, or the different player types. That there are people who don't care about combat at all. And then there are people
Yeah.
that if you don't have combat, they will never touch your game. They will curse it with every fiber of their being.
Yeah, you have like people that just like to pick flowers in MMOs and garden, and you have people that just it has to be PvP everywhere, and I can steal your gear, and like all kind of people in the camp. So yeah, PvP and PvE is definitely one of controversial. A lot of people like to have the option to like only PvP zone, like
Mm-hmm.
there's no PvP in the zone or no PvP, but again, that kind of takes away from like what an Elden Ring like
Mm-hmm.
thing would be like what we're talking about discussing right now. Like that, you would have to have PvP all the time. Otherwise, it just kind of takes away from it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, zero PvP or PvP is a bigger controversy, actually.
Yep, zero PvP or force. It's, again, like, there are people who, if you give them either option, they're never going to play your game. And it is, again, about that issue that for a lot of MMOs, you can't have it. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You need to have
Yeah,
an established core gameplay loop and established progression. And then if you try to, hodgepodge fit these systems in after the fact, it gets back to that feeling of being soulless and the busy work of it.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, MMOs lack depth. It's funny because they're so complicated, right? They're like a very complicated game. Chris is saying there's not enough flower picking, really in MMOs, and that they kind of lack depth anyway. And
Mm-hmm.
and maybe that's kind of the core point is that maybe underneath the trappings of it all, the mechanics of MMOs, um, are
Mm-hmm.
kind of so bare bones, and it's just like the social aspect of MMOs is the main thing that we really like, being able to play. And so
Mm-hmm.
like that's kind of maybe where the issues lie, Josh.
Yeah. And again, like, some of that, I spoke with Ramin about that. He's also very much lamenting the fact that there aren't new MMOs that are pushing things forward. Like, the
Yeah,
genre kind of blew up. We could say maybe like 1998 to maybe 2005, 2006,
and
and
that's
then
it.
everyone just kind of stopped all
Hmm.
innovation, all iteration, and it's just been the same basic gameplay loops. And again, the games that have, tried to do something differently, they are still surviving. I don't know if we would say they're thriving in the same way as we look at something like
No,
a Genshin Impact or,
no.
any mobile or live service games, but they were still able to at least capture an audience. And I think for my final point, it would be that the days in which you can make a game and declare it to be the World Warcraft killer or the Genshin Impact killer or the Dead by Daylight killer, it's just not going to work. These games are too entrenched. So you
Yeah,
have to do something different. You have to go in a unusual direction. Because again, there's oftentimes going to be a market that is not being served. And if you can be that first one who can do it, and you can do it in a way that is quality, you can become that next standard. And again, it's why we see games like Azure Lane, Arknights, Genshin, Dragon Ball Legends, and so on have earned major money and they are still going strong. A lot of these games are celebrating 3, 4, 6 plus years of having live service. And when's the last time you've heard an MMO have those numbers that's not a World of Warcraft or a Final Fantasy
right.
14?
Exactly. Exactly. For my final point, I'm just gonna, I think we basically covered everything, but I'm just gonna say again, Elden Ring, best MMO, and all MMOs are dead.
There you go. And I'm just wondering again, where can things go? Like,
Yeah, where
can
can they
someone
go?
make, I guess, a low budget MMO. Like, let's say one that could survive off of maybe 50,000 or 100,000 active players.
See, now I totally think that's possible with like we've discussed before with the advancements we have in game dev, or in our engines and stuff like that. Multiplayer is getting a little easier. It's still really hard to do, just infrastructure and servers and everything. But like I think it probably might be possible to get like a nice little I don't want like a nice little indie small that does something different MMO. I believe in it. I hope it can happen. Um
All the indie devs watching right now, go make EverQuest
Go
4.
go
Or,
make Everquest
come
4,
on, you can do it.
especially if it's your first game.
Yes. Do it all in like 1 week for like $20,000.
That's right, bud.
It's possible. There's a speed run challenge.
Okay, Pug said give him a week.
All right, there you go.
I believe in you, Pug.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on? Hmm. Micro MMO. So it's kind of we consider something like V Rising be an example of that as well, Chris. I think I do think there is merit in terms of these kinds of like small scale kind of games, but again, it's that question of how do you support something like that over months, if not years?
Hmm.
And
Financially, also.
and I do feel that again because they're so player driven in terms of their content, they can get away with less. But at the same time, I again like just like with a lot of the bigger scale MMOs, like I just find their general gameplay to be I just don't enjoy their moment to moment loop.
Hmm. Yeah, and again, that's one of the things we always espouse on the show. The moment-to-moment gameplay needs to be enjoyable, and again, that's one of the tenets. Like as if you're an MMO fan, you give that up. You're like, yeah, this is the gameplay, and you're just kind of pressing ones and twos and shifts on your keyboard like every now and then. Uh, it's just one of the things that you do. But
Yeah.
I don't think it should be that way. I think that there's definitely a way to have a really good engaging moment to movement uh you know MMO that'll work.
Mm-hmm. I guess something like 7 Days to Die could also fit into this as well. Of
Hmm.
being like very small scale, but again, like very huge game space, and it is just about like a group of people interacting with each other. I think that can work, but at the same time, again, I don't see the legs of this. Like, I don't see how a game like this, once it hits 1.0, how it could be extended out for months and years of content. And again, like that's where the live service games have really, I think, taken over and being able to say we can expand this game, we can add more to it, and we'll have content, every 2 weeks or every month for the next 5 to 10 years if this game is still doing well. And like even like something like the Arma games or DayZ, like I think those could maybe also fit into the space to some extent.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, like when I was doing Daisy and Arma, I felt like it. I felt the MMO vibe. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So those are pretty close. I mean, again, the lines are so blurry, and is it just that we're having player interaction that we can almost say it's an MMO, right?
Mm-hmm. Or at least like having that community aspect of it.
The community
Because
aspect,
you don't need like 10 million people to play a game to have a community. You just need enough people that can all work and interact with each other.
right? Yeah, just enough active people, constantly playing,
Yeah.
definitely.
But I think that is a good spot for us to wrap up for this week. There's still plenty more genres and topics we'll be able to get to for future shows. So, everybody, thank you again for tuning in. Do all the liking, subscribing, and commenting. For the recorded folks watching this, can you think of MMOs that are still doing well on the smaller scale, who may not have World of Warcraft numbers, but they're still able to compete content wise or interest wise with the big boys?
Or what do you think the future of MMOs is? Or
Mhm.
what would you like to see changed in MMOs that might make you, if you're not a fan, get back to them? appreciate them more.
Mm-hmm. And we will be back next Saturday at 5 p.m. ET. Again, you'll find links to all my stuff down below, and there's my Patreon, Discord, and Twitter up there on the overlay.
And same for me. Links are down below. Follow me on my Twitter and game development on Twitch. And we will see you next time.
Oh, yes. So, everyone, have a great rest of your weekend and come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where some of the art and science of games. Until next time, take care.